We need a new system, and I've been for a system where we would eliminate the deductions and all the distortions and the special spending programs that are part of the tax code, and lower the rates and have something that will let us be competitive in today's world.
Former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson, who spoke to us earlier about tax policy, joining us now to talk about taxes, the budget, and politics. Senator Rob Portman, a Republican from Ohio who sits on the Budget Committee. He's also a former OMB director under President George W. Bush, and even more importantly, a former 2-hour guest host on Squawk. Which has that moved? That's moved to like the top of your CV at this point, hasn't it, Senator?
It has.
Yeah.
Squawk Box.
Yeah. We've had a lot of comments about the budget. I guess it's a commentary on our times that I can't even get a Democrat to say that it's not a political document. I haven't had one person that's been on, Senator, say it's an actual budget.
Yeah, Andrew, unfortunately, I think you're right. And
oh, wait,
if you look
Senator, this is me. This is me. This is me.
Is that Kernan?
That's Kernan. Was it something I said?
I thought Andrew was giving me a softball there. You sound so sophisticated this morning,
Those are from me. Didn't you hear me say Democrat?
Senator Joe does the softballs.
See, I thought I was so surprised that you were dishing one up for me, Andrew. Sorry. Okay, Joe. Well, let me answer your question then. Last year, the president presented a budget that was also called political, and it was actually taken to the floor of the Senate, and it was voted down 97-0. And look, these are political times. We're in a campaign year, but these are also times of trillion-dollar deficits, record debt, spending more as a country than we've ever spent since World War II, the most as a percent of our GDP. And it's time to put the politics aside and actually put out a blueprint that makes sense. So this is not that blueprint. I just heard Hank Paulson talking about tax reform. There's nothing in here on tax reform. In fact, it increases taxes significantly. Even on dividend taxes, which people watching probably care about, people thought the budget would probably go from 15% to maybe 20%, maybe 25%. Dividend tax goes actually up to 39.6% here. And congressional budget offices looked at, what happens when these taxes go up. Guess what? Unemployment's going to be higher next year as a result. So this is a political document. It doesn't touch Social Security. It does very little on Medicare, almost all of it on the provider side, to the point that entitlements as a percent of our budget, we talked about this when I was on the air, but it's about 64% now, when you include interest on the debt and Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, so-called mandatory spending. So it's the biggest part of the budget, fastest growing part of the budget. Over this 10-year period, it goes from 64% to 78% of the budget. So I know Ambassador Spogley is here today. You can tell us what happens in Southern Europe when you come to an entitlement society where you just can't stop the spending. That's the track we're on.
All right, I guess that what I was leading to by saying both sides admit it's political, because the Democrats will say that proudly that it was political, because there's no reason to try to deal with Republicans on a budget right now, because they're just going to say no to everything that the president proposes. So why give a serious budget proposal when it's not going to get anywhere anyway? Why give up any ground at this point in an election year? I mean, that makes some sense, doesn't it? Well,
as I said earlier, it's an election year and it's tougher, but you look at last August, which isn't too long ago, President Obama and Speaker Boehner were apparently very close to what was called the grand bargain. It was in essence a budget. It was about revenues and about spending. And the president has backtracked since then significantly, including with the super committee, basically giving us the same proposal that he gave Congress this week. So I do think that there is some receptivity on the other side of the aisle, meaning the Republican side of the aisle, to real solutions to the problems that we know we face and have to address. And I actually think it would be good for the president politically. I think it would be good for the country as well for us to address some of these issues. And this is an opportunity to do it. At least to have the debate. We can't have the debate now because we don't have a budget document that can make its way to the floor. The Senate, as you know, has not even produced a budget for over 1,000 days now. So we're in our third year of no budget here. So we aren't even going to have the debate on the floor at a time, again, where we have these deficits of over $1 trillion, record debt. 42 cents of every dollar is being borrowed that's being spent. So this is a scary time. And I know the ambassadors here, you can talk about what's going on again in Europe, but we are headed toward a very similar situation. And it's not like we don't have an example there now. We look at what happening in Greece. You know, Athens is aflame. Look what's happening in Spain and Portugal and Italy. We're headed that way unless we change direction. And unfortunately, this budget doesn't help us to even take a step in that direction.
All right, Andrew, give him a question that he will know is coming from you, where you won't even have to identify yourself. Just give it to him.
The hard. What kind of question would that be?
He's a Republican.
I understand.
Say anything.
Come at me, Andrew. Come on.
Your heart. Speak from your heart.
Just
your occupied heart.
You know what? It's so unfair to be pigeonholed this way.
Just pigeonhole me.
No,
you fall Republican gas kisser.
No.
Go ahead. Come on.
Well, no,
you guys have gone from chickens to pigeons.
Yeah. Give it to him.
You know what, Joe? You asked the question that I would ask.
You
already asked it.
Right. Why should he do anything when he's not going to get it?
Why should he do anything when he's not going to get it? That was a tough
from both sides.
That was a tough hardball question.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Joe Kernan, fair and balanced.
Yeah, Joe Kernan. Oh, thank you. I got accused of that yesterday, Senator. Yeah, they told me to go to fair and balanced.
Senator Ron Spogley, just one quick question, moving to energy for a moment, if I can.
Think of something.
When you look at the decision on Keystone and you couple that with the Canadians having decided to sell their oil to the Chinese, as a policymaker, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's frustrating, and again, it's a political decision not consistent with what the president said in the State of the Union, which is he wants us to become less dependent on sources of oil from the Mideast and other volatile and dangerous parts of the world. So, you know, it's a decision that also affects jobs, and not just jobs directly related to the pipeline, which they say is about 20,000 jobs, but it's actually over time many more than that, of course, because it's about our refineries being able to increase their capacity. It's about places like Ohio, where I'm from, manufacturing things that go into the pipe making and into the pumps and into other things related to the pipe. So this is a decision that makes no sense from an economic point of view or an energy security point of view. We have a great opportunity, Ron, as you know, and that is for us to actually use our own domestic sources of natural gas and oil and so-called wet gas, things that, you know, we frankly didn't know we had access to until the last several years with this new technology and the new finds. So this is an enormous opportunity. In Ohio, we have a report out saying that we can create up to 200,000 jobs in the next several years alone just by accessing some of these shale finds. The president ought to take the opposite position, which is to aggressively pursue this. It's, you know, affordable, reliable, cleaner energy. It's a huge advantage for us as a country at a time when, frankly, we've got a lot of competitive disadvantages.
All right, we put our heads together.
So, Senator, we put our heads together. I have a question.
Right.
This would be the left of all left questions, and the question would be this.
Yes.
You saw the jobs numbers last week.
Yes.
You've seen what's happened in the market. Some people, even in this building, called it the Obama rally. Do you give the president credit for what's taken place over the past several months, given the jobs numbers?
And stock market.
First of all,
and stock
you and I
market.
talked about
Bravo.
this. You and I talked this when we were on before. The jobs numbers are better, and we should celebrate that. The fact is, though, that we still have a lot of people who are not looking for work because they have left the job market. So instead of being 8.3%, we should be at 8.5 or 8.6% just on that alone. If we had the labor participation rate pre-recession now, we would be at about 10% unemployment. Hardly something to celebrate. So yes, we're making some progress, but we have a long way to go. And again, this recession was relatively deep, but the recovery is the weakest in modern history. So we're still down about 5.5 million jobs as compared to the 81 recession, another deep one. We were up 6 million jobs by now, as opposed to the so-called jobless recession in 2001, 2003, where we were up about 350,000 jobs by now. So I think it's too soon to do the victory dance in the end zone, and instead it's time for us to reform our taxes, regulatory relief, energy, as the ambassador talked about. We've got to really focus on restructuring our economy to make us more competitive. And unless we do that, I think we'll have what happened about a year ago. Remember, a year ago we had a little blip where things seemed to be getting better. Unfortunately, I think we're looking at a situation based on what the Congressional Budget Office has told us, which is a nonpartisan group, of higher unemployment next year. The president's budget talks about that. He says there'll be higher unemployment next year, and actually in 2014, higher unemployment than we have now.
Did you endorse anyone yet, Rob?
I did. I actually endorsed Mitt Romney after being on the show with you when you guys, sort of forced me to look into my heart and think about who I really wanted.
Okay. All right. Good. And have they?
And I endorsed him because I think he'd be the best president. And I think on these very issues we're talking about, he gets it, and I think he would focus on results and trying to actually achieve something that this country desperately needs, which is pro-growth economic policies and dealing with our debt and deficit. I think he'd be the right guy to do that.
Would you be on the ticket if they asked you?
No, I'm happy where I am, and actually he's going to need some help here in the Senate if he gets elected.
That's like a button. That's like a pull cord that every vice president says, I'm happy where I am. I mean,
I am happy where I am.
I know you are, but
and there's lots to do.
Okay. Ohio is an important state, as you know.
It is an important
Senator.
state.
All right, Senator Portman, thank you. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Joe.
Today, and you
as an
handled
Ohio
that.
native, I'm glad you acknowledge Ohio's importance.
Right, I do. And that withering. See, this is how we do it from both sides, right, Andrew?
Yeah,
Both sides.
From both sides. From both sides now, Senator Rob Portman.
From the middle.